But right now, we want to turn our attention to the 2021 NFL Draft. And today, we're going to focus on the Clemson prospects. And to get more into that, we are now joined by a man who covers the Clemson football team for the Post and Courier, none other than Josh Needelman. Josh, you got Lance Medow, Paul Dottino here on Giants.com, Big Blue Kickoff Live. Appreciate the time today. Hope you and yours are safe and healthy. How's everything on your end?
Things are great. Thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it.
Well, happy to have you aboard. Let's start from a big picture perspective, Josh. They just had their pro day the other week, and this class I wouldn't say is as deep in terms of volume perhaps as we've seen with previous Clemson classes, but what it all jumped out to you about what was shown at the pro day that maybe shed a little bit more light on one or two of these prospects that we had not necessarily seen based on the film over the last few seasons?
Yeah, well, first of all, Travis Ettiene, Clemson's running back, was huge. His official weight during the season was 199 pounds. He weighed in at 215 for Clemson's pro day, and it was all muscle. As we saw, he still has his speed. He ran a 4.41 and a 4.43 in the 40. So he's retained his speed, and he's a lot bigger. And he was already a power back. So he's really kind of rounding into form. That was kind of the biggest thing that really stuck out to me from pro day.
What do you think teams are looking at him with in terms of, do you think they're looking at him more to be that speed guy, that outside guy, maybe a third down back? Or do you think now with this extra weight, is he trying to say to them, you know what, I can be more than that. I can be an every down guy who can also take it between the tackles?
Yes, he would say that. He would also say that he's, and he's improved as a pass catcher. He's improved as a blocker, too. I mean, he really there was a lot of surprise when he came back for his senior season. He said he wanted to come back to earn his education, of course, but on the field he wanted to work as a pass catcher, and we saw that. Clemson's offensive line was kind of a little bit below par this season. So Travis really excelled as a pass catcher. So I think he's telling the teams, he's like, look, I can be an every down back. I can run between the tackles. I can block for you, and I can also make some noise catching balls out of the backfield. He had 48 catches last year for almost 600 yards and a couple of touchdowns. So he's kind of a do-it-all guy.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the reception total because it's quite interesting to see the evolution of him, Josh, as a pass catcher, because we're talking about a guy that had 5 receptions his first year, then it went to 12 to 37 to 48. So little by little, they seem to get him more and more involved as a receiver out of the backfield. Now, you mentioned the offensive line had a rough go this past season. Is the 48 receptions, do you think, a product of the offensive line struggles and the offense needing to adjust, or Clemson's offensive mindset, meaning, hey, we got to find other ways to get this guy the football?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. I mean, if you look at his rushing stats, he only averaged 5.4 yards to carry this past year, and that's obviously way down from his junior year. He was 7.8 yards to carry, 8.1 his sophomore year, averaged 7.2 for his career. So I think it was we need to find a way to get him involved otherwise, and also by then opposing defenses knew who Travis Ettiene was, so that they were loading the box and had to find another way to beat defense. And he clearly did. I mean, he was especially on a year when Clemson's top wide receivers were out for most of the season because of injuries. He was kind of one of their main options. He really shone, actually. It's interesting, the 2 games that Trevor Lawrence missed. DJ Uiagalelei had to play quarterback for Trevor because Trevor had COVID. And that first week, Travis had 7 catches for 140 yards and a touchdown. So, yeah, really kind of a do-it-all guy. I think coming back for that senior year really helped his stock a lot.
Josh, I don't think I want to waste your time to give us a scouting report on Trevor Lawrence. We all know everything about what he can do. But from being around the Tigers program, is there anybody there who would be shocked, or should I say not shocked is probably the more accurate statement, if he winds up not being the number 1 pick?
Oh.
I mean, honestly.
That would be weird. That would be strange. Just especially with that, he had his own personal pro day back in February, and that was just on a couple days' notice. And that was actually at the urging of Urban Meyer. They had been on a Zoom, and Trevor needed surgery in his non-throwing shoulder. So, Clemson's pro day was mid-March. Trevor would have just been recovering from surgery right now if he waited until mid-March, so they bumped it up till February. And Urban Meyer really kind of asserted himself there. If you go back to the photo and the videos from Trevor Lawrence's pro day, you had Urban Meyer was standing front and center right next to Dabo Swinney. It was kind of a power move. Yeah, he was like, no, this is my guy. Don't even think about it. He's coming to Jacksonville.
We are talking with Josh Needelman, who covers the Clemson Tigers for the Post and Courier, as they just recently had their pro day. Since, as Paul mentioned, there's really no point in delving deep into Trevor Lawrence, since I think you have to be living under a rock if you don't realize his upside as a quarterback, and it's highly unlikely that the Giants are even going to have the ability to even have a pipe dream. I want to go more towards the guys that are protecting Trevor Lawrence, and you hit on the offensive line and some of the ups and downs, and they do have their left tackle who's throwing his name into the NFL draft in Jackson Carman, somebody that started all 12 games at left tackle this past season. Really the last 2 seasons he seems to have been a staple there. What have you seen out of him in terms of his consistency in run blocking versus pass protection?
That's an interesting question. It's kind of tough with the offensive line because so much of it is based on chemistry and, is a guy next to you making his reads and whatnot. Jackson was a little bit up and down this past year for sure. I think he would say he's probably a little more productive. His first year as a starter when he was a sophomore. But you know what? He's 6'6" and 328. You can't teach that. So I think Jack's the heck of a prospect for this draft.
The one comment that I saw coming out of the pro day, Josh, was that he does have rather short arms, and we know that guys in the NFL get very queasy about drafting a tackle with short arms. Do you sense that there is any possibility that people are looking at him potentially as a guard to move him inside?
They could be. They could be for sure. Clemson does kind of cross-train all their offensive linemen. Even just talking to Dabo yesterday, for this coming season, he said no player has a home yet. Everyone's kind of learning all positions. So I could see that. And if he were to make that move, he's had experience there. Obviously not as much as as his preferred position, but I think he'd probably be well suited to handle that.
Probably the most intriguing position out of this Clemson draft class, obviously in addition to Travis Ettiene, who you were talking about earlier, is the 2 wide receivers, because it was really an impressive campaign for both of them in terms of what Amari Rodgers did as well as what Cornell Powell did. I want to start with Amari Rodgers first because he did a really good job at the Senior Bowl, but if I read this correctly, Josh, they put him through running back drills at the pro day. How did he look when they moved him through some of those running back drills, and what do you see his perhaps fit at the NFL level?
Yeah, that was interesting. That was a surprise to Amari too. He didn't see that coming. I don't know. It's interesting. He was Clemson's slot guy this year, but again, a little bit of a shorter guy, 5'10". It's something that could work. He's got actually a very similar body type to Travis Ettiene. Really bulky, really strong, obviously really quick. It could work. He looked good. Amari also returned punts this year, so and kickoff. So he has experience doing other things. He has experience moving through traffic. But that definitely caught him off guard for sure. But you know what? Amari Rodgers' father is a football coach. T. Martin, he's with the Ravens now. He was in college for a number of years. I think Amari's a smart player. I don't think the transition, if that were to happen full time, I don't think that would necessarily be too much of a culture shock for him, because I got the impression he could play every position. He might be even able to coach every position. That's just how knowledgeable he is.
Powell is an interesting prospect for me, Josh, because he's not the tallest guy in the box, certainly not the fastest guy in the box. But his production is really good. He's got tremendous athleticism. I use the word a lot of times about a guy who is so pliable and athletic that he's like Gumby. He is a Gumby kind of player for me. And I could see somebody having a twinkle in their eye for him and thinking they may get him as a later-round steal.
Yeah, I totally agree. Cornell Powell was a 4-star guy. He actually was in that mix to start his freshman year back in 2016, but he got hurt. And at Clemson, when you get hurt, there's 4 or 5 more guys who are as talented or more talented than you, and they're going to take your spot. And then that's kind of what happened. 2017, 2018, 2019, he's kind of this bit player, and then like you said, I mean, really excelled that senior year. I'd love to have him on my team. He's a gamer. He also was really helpful with DJ Uiagalelei when Trevor went down. DJ kind of went back to Cornell again and again, that Notre Dame game and the Boston College game. Not the tallest wide receiver, 6 foot tall. Maybe not the most explosive, but he runs really good routes. He's got great hands. He's consistent. I think he'd be a really good late-round pick for sure.
Yeah, he jumped to 53 receptions this past season after having 15 in 2019, which goes back to what you said. He was just stuck behind so much talent over the last few years that he finally gets playing time, and he transferred that to productivity. The other thing that I think jumps out, Josh, is the 7 touchdowns. You mentioned, he's not the most explosive, but he's got good hands. What stood out to you about how they targeted him specifically in scoring opportunities and how that may transfer over to the NFL level?
Well, he was kind of the guy. I mean, usually Clemson likes to, in 2019 they'd throw it up to T. Higgins and Justin Ross, a pair of guys, 6'3", 6'4". With Cornell, it was more kind of slants. It was more kind of inside looks. It wasn't necessarily putting it up and letting him jump for it. It was just kind of, relying on his route running and getting him the ball in a place where he could catch it. Because he was going to catch it, right? It was a matter of just him getting him in those right spots.
Is there anybody else who we haven't touched on who you think could be a dark horse that would potentially catch the eye of some NFL folks?
Let's see. I think we hit the main ones. J.C. Chalk is eligible at tight end. I don't know that he's necessarily going to catch a ton of eyes. Clemson did work out a couple of skill position players who haven't gone to the NFL yet, who were DeAndre Overton graduated in 2019. The thing about Overton is, he really could have been Powell. He could have been Cornell Powell. He was kind of a really talented guy, 4-star guy who kind of didn't really get that opportunity to shine. Cornell got it, his redshirt senior year. Overton never really got it, but he's still in great shape. He looked good at Pro Day too.
And he's a skyscraper too. So,
right, exactly. Right.
I know, Josh, you don't get to listen to this program very often, but I love skyscrapers.
He's a skyscraper for sure. Dabo always credited him because he probably could have gone somewhere and gotten a lot more playing time, but he wanted to stick with that program and do things the right way. And it'd be nice to see him on a roster. I think he can contribute.
Josh, last one for me, more of a big picture, because as you mentioned, we went over pretty much in detail each of the prospects. The Giants are in a position where maybe they have the luxury to not necessarily go after a major need, but add some depth to what they've already done in free agency. Travis Ettiene, Amari Rodgers, Cornell, Powell. If I were to ask you, of those 3, who do you think will have the biggest impact on the NFL level? Who has the most upside? What would your response be?
I think it's Travis Ettiene. You do worry about running backs, obviously, and their longevity. And Travis did do 4 years at Clemson. He could have left after his junior year, gotten drafted probably the early second rounds last year, made a lot of money, been really successful. So the longevity thing is an issue, but in terms of pure talent, in terms of a guy who could really help you win his rookie year, I think Travis Ettiene and Saquon Barkley would be a really fun backfield. Oh my God, that would be amazing. That to me, he's the most fun player. He's the guy I'm most looking forward to seeing.
Very cool.
You're gonna have Giants fans foaming at the mouth after that comment there, Josh.
I hear you.
Good stuff.
He is Josh Needelman, who covers the Clemson football team for the Post and Courier. Josh, greatly appreciate the time and the insight. Stay safe and healthy, and look forward to talking to you down the road. Thanks again.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.